We all cheered when David Woolley looked Kody Brown dead in the eye, publicly confronted him on national television, and delivered the 4 words that shattered Kody's ego forever. Start with your kids. It was the ultimate mic drop moment. For the first time in 25 years, a man stood up to Kody Brown, refused to back down. But what if I told you that iconic television moment was only a fraction of what actually happened? There is a second half to that confrontation. A dark, intense, closed-door standoff that TLC allegedly cut from the final edit to protect the network's flailing patriarch. And what David threatened to do if Kody didn't back off completely changes everything we know about the custody dynamics of the Brown family. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving deep into the unaired, explosive showdown between David Woolley and Kody Brown. You've seen the polished version that made it to your screen, but what happens when the cameras stop rolling and a narcissist realizes he has entirely lost control? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why Kody's demeanor shifted so drastically after Christine's wedding. You are going to learn about the strict, non-negotiable ultimatum David laid down regarding Truely Brown. We are going to uncover the alleged threats involving Utah lawyers, past medical trauma, and custody handovers that left Kody completely speechless. By the time we finish, this revelation will completely change how you've been thinking about this family, and it will finally explain the secret reason Kody has been so incredibly bitter in his recent interviews. We are going to give you the final payoff. We will reveal the exact words David Woolley used to strip Kody of his remaining power. But to understand why David's an unaired threat hit Kody where it hurts the most, we have to rewind. We have to look at the deeply rooted trauma that forced David to become the ultimate protector of Christine and her children in the first place. Christine Brown finding true love with David Woolley was the fairy tale ending Sister Wives fans had been praying for since the very first season. After decades of begging for scraps of affection, surviving in a loveless marriage, and watching her children be systematically ignored in favor of Robin's kids, Christine finally broke free. And when she married David in Moab, Utah, surrounded by 330 guests, it wasn't just a wedding. It was a massive, undeniable statement of victory. Do you remember seeing the pure, unadulterated joy on Christine's face that day? Do you remember the way her children looked at David? But behind the beautiful aesthetics of that wedding, a massive power shift was occurring. David wasn't just stepping in as a husband, he was firmly establishing himself as the fierce protector of Christine and her kids. To truly grasp why David went scorched earth on Kody behind closed doors, you have to remember what Christine and her children survived. Think back to season 6. Do you recall the absolute nightmare when little Truely went into acute kidney failure while in Kody's care? Christine had trusted him to watch their children while the wives went to San Francisco. Instead of being a responsible parent, Kody brushed off Truely's severe lethargy. By the time Christine got home and rushed her to the hospital, Truely was fighting for her life. How does a mother ever forgive that kind of negligence? How does a father ever justify it? Here is a surprising fact that many fans forget about that terrifying ordeal. During Truely's hospitalization, Kody was reportedly more concerned about the financial burden and the lack of health insurance than he was about his own daughter's near-death experience. He consistently deflected blame, refusing to acknowledge that his lack of supervision almost cost Truely her life. And it didn't stop there. Fast forward to Ysabel's agonizing battle with scoliosis. We all watched in absolute horror as Kody suggested his teenage daughter travel across the country to undergo major spinal surgery by herself because he couldn't bear to be away from Robin's tender-aged children. He refused to hold her hand while she was in unspeakable pain. He called her surgery a vacation. Is it any wonder that Christine's children harbored deep resentment toward their biological father? How could they not? When David Woolley entered the picture, he didn't just see a beautiful woman in Christine. He saw a family that had been emotionally battered by a patriarch who demanded absolute loyalty but offered zero protection. David, a widower and a dedicated father himself, recognized the signs of emotional abuse immediately. He saw the way Truely shrunk into herself when Kody's name was mentioned. He saw the scars Kody's rejection had left on Ysabel, retention anchor. But if you think David was just going to sit back and play the quiet, supportive new husband while Kody continued to throw tantrums from afar, you have absolutely no idea what was brewing behind the scenes. What David was secretly preparing to do so would completely paralyze the Brown family patriarch. For 25 years, Kody lived in an echo chamber. He was the center of his own universe. He barked orders, and his wives scrambled to obey. If someone questioned him, he withheld his affection as punishment. He weaponized his love. But how do you think a narcissist reacts when his authority is suddenly laughed at by a man who owes him nothing? David wasn't part of the polygamous culture. He wasn't brainwashed by Kody's fundamentalist, patriarchal nonsense. When Kody tried to flex his muscles and act like the ultimate authority figure over Christine, David simply wasn't having it. David's presence alone was a massive trigger for Kody. It completely dismantled Kody's narrative that Christine would be miserable and destitute without him. Instead, she was thriving, and she had a strong, financially stable, fiercely loyal man by her side. This brings us to the confrontation that broke the internet. The moment Sister Wives fans had been waiting years to witness. You've seen the aired footage. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Kody looking predictably flustered, angry, and trying desperately to maintain control of the narrative. David looking serious, grounded, and entirely unbothered by Kody's puffed-out chest. When Kody tried to steer the conversation toward his own grievances, playing the perpetual victim, David cut him off with a line that belongs in the reality TV Hall of Fame. Start with your kids. It was a brilliant, concise redirection. It told Kody, I don't care about your drama with your ex-wives. I care about the fact that you have abandoned your children. Fans celebrated. Memes were made. David was crowned the king of the Sister Wives fandom. But reality TV rarely shows the full picture, does it? Why did the scene feel so abruptly cut? Why did Kody's reaction seem edited down? According to rumblings from a prominent production insider who leaked details to a highly popular Sister Wives podcast, the confrontation we saw on television was heavily sanitized. The full exchange was allegedly much longer, significantly louder, and infinitely more intense. Here is a shocking detail that changes the context of that entire scene. Sources suggest that before David delivered his iconic line, Kody was actually aggressively demanding that David respect his authority as the patriarch of the family. Kody allegedly got into David's personal space, aggressively pointing his finger, telling David that he was stepping out of line and that Ysabel and Truely were still his territory. Just imagine that for a second. Kody Brown, a man who abandoned his daughter during spinal surgery, looking another grown man in the eye and demanding respect. How delusional do you have to be? In response, David didn't just tell him to start with your kids. That was merely the opening salvo. According to the leaks, David systematically dismantled Kody's ego piece by piece. He allegedly laid down strict, uncompromising ground rules regarding Truely. You have to remember that Ysabel Brown initially had her reservations about David. When David proposed to Christine, Ysabel went on camera and confessed that it felt too soon. She was protective of her mother. She had seen her mother cry a river of tears over Kody, and she didn't want Christine to get hurt again. Ysabel was cautious. But seeing how fiercely David stood up to her biological father reportedly shifted the dynamic entirely. Can you imagine what it felt like for Ysabel to witness a man finally defending her mother? For years, the Brown children had to watch Kody scream at Christine, belittle her cooking, mock her behavior, and call her a bad sister wife. They had to sit in silence while Kody verbally abused their mother. And now, suddenly, here was David Woolley, acting as an impenetrable human shield. We are going to get into the exact legal threats David allegedly hurled at Kody regarding Truely's medical history in just a moment. And trust me, it involves a deep, dark fear that Kody has been harboring for over a decade. According to Reddit threads compiling the leaks from this production insider, Kody absolutely lost his mind when David refused to back down. Kody's ego couldn't handle being spoken to like a subordinate. He wasn't used to a man holding him accountable. When David allegedly started listing out Kody's failures, specifically referencing the past medical neglect, Kody began to panic. Why would Kody panic? Because Kody knows that Utah family courts do not look favorably upon fathers with a documented history of absenteeism and medical negligence. The rumor alleges that Kody stormed off set, absolutely furious, and went straight to TLC producers. He didn't just ask them to edit the footage. He allegedly demanded they scrub the rest of David's speech from existence. Why? Because it made Kody look incredibly weak. It made him look submissive. For a man whose entire identity is wrapped up in his alpha male delusion, having a national audience watch him get verbally disciplined by his ex-wife's new, "My husband had a fate worse than death." Did TLC protect him? Fans on Twitter seem to think so. They point to the weird editing cuts during the conversation, the sudden changes in camera angles, and the fact that Kody's microphone seemed to be muted during certain reaction shots. It strongly suggests that a massive chunk of audio was removed in post-production. But hiding the footage didn't change the reality of what happened in that room. The power dynamic had permanently shifted. Kody walked into that confrontation expecting to intimidate David Woolley. He walked out realizing that he had zero power, zero leverage, and absolutely no way to control Christine or Truely ever again. And what David allegedly said regarding his lawyers? That is the piece of the puzzle that explains why Kody has completely given up on trying to fight for custody. So, where exactly does this leave the fractured Brown family today? What is happening right now, in real time, that makes this unaired confrontation so crucial to understanding Kody's current mental state? To see the lingering effects of David's closed-door ultimatum, all you have to do is look at Kody's recent behavior. Have you noticed how drastically Kody's tone has shifted in his latest interviews? Do you remember the man who used to confidently proclaim that love should be multiplied, not divided? That man is completely gone. In his place is a bitter, isolated, and visibly defeated man who spends most of his time making excuses alongside his only remaining wife, Robin. Meanwhile, Christine and David are living out loud. They are traveling, spending holidays with a massive blended family, and creating a stable, loving environment in Utah. But the most significant change isn't just about Christine's happiness. It's about Truely. How is Truely coping with this new dynamic? Brilliantly. If you follow Christine's social media, you see a thriving, smiling teenager who is learning to drive ATVs, going on epic road trips, and finally experiencing what it looks like to have a present father figure. David has seamlessly stepped into the role of a supportive, everyday dad. He attends the family gatherings. He plays with McKelty's children, acting as the doting grandfather that Kody simply refuses to be. But what about Kody? Does he still demand 50-50 custody like he aggressively screamed about on Christine's back porch in Flagstaff? Here is a highly surprising fact that changes the entire narrative of Kody's devoted father act. Despite Kody's explosive, red-faced televised tantrums demanding a strict 50-50 custody split, legal sleuths and fans have pointed out a massive inconsistency. Allegedly, Kody never filed any formal custody paperwork in the state of Utah after Christine moved. He screamed for the cameras about his rights. He threw a massive fit about Christine stealing his daughter. But when the cameras turned off and it was time to legally fight for his child, crickets. He did absolutely nothing. Why would a man who claims to be so fiercely protective of his parental rights completely abandon the legal process? This is where the present situation perfectly connects to that unaired confrontation with David. You have to realize what a massive blow this entire situation has been due to Kody's fragile ego. For 18 seasons, you watched him operate under the absolute delusion that he was untouchable. He believed his wives would never actually leave. He believed his children would eventually crawl back and beg for his approval. He believed his authority was divine. What happens to a narcissist when that delusion is shattered? They retreat. Kody hasn't pursued formal custody because Kody is terrified of being exposed in a real court of law. He knows that if he pushes the issue, David Woolley has the financial means, the protective instinct, and the unyielding determination to fund a massive legal counterstrike alongside Christine. Can you imagine Kody trying to explain to a Utah family court judge why he refused to travel for Ysabel's surgery? Or how he left Truely under-supervised until her kidneys shut down? Or why he refused to see his biological children for months on end during the pandemic while simultaneously having a nanny over to Robin's house? Kody knows a judge would absolutely tear him apart. David's presence has effectively neutralized Kody, and the contrasts between their two lives right now are staggering. While David is hosting massive backyard barbecues with dozens of Brown family children who adore him, Kody and Robin are allegedly living in an isolated echo chamber on the Coyote Pass property. That dream of building massive homes for a united polygamist family? It's a literal wasteland now. The property is nothing but dirt, weeds, and the ghost of a family Kody destroyed. Have you ever wondered what goes through Kody's mind when he scrolls through social media and sees David holding his grandchildren? Do you think he feels remorse? Or do you think he just feels an overwhelming sense of anger that someone else is sitting on his throne? We are getting dangerously close to the exact words David allegedly used during that unaired standoff. We still haven't discussed the specific, terrifying ultimatum David laid down regarding Truely's medical history. And trust me, when you hear what David told Kody he would do if Kody ever tried to corner Christine alone again during a custody handover, Kody's sudden disappearance from Truely's daily life will make complete, undeniable sense. Because Kody didn't just back off gracefully, he was forced into submission. Right now, Kody is trying to spin a narrative in the press that he is the victim of a malicious smear campaign. He frequently implies that Christine poisoned the children against him. He refuses to take accountability, opting instead to blame his ex-wives for his fractured relationships. It is a classic deflection. But the reality of the present situation is that the children didn't need Christine to poison them against Kody. They lived it. They felt the sting of his rejection firsthand. And when they finally saw what a real man looked like, a man who puts his wife and kids first, a man who doesn't demand respect but earns it through consistency and love, the illusion of Kody Brown was broken forever. What David did wasn't just about winning an argument. He was drawing a permanent line in the sand. He was locking the gate on the emotional abuse that had plagued Christine's household for 2.5 decades. But how did he phrase it? What was the exact threat that made TLC producers allegedly cut the footage to save Kody from absolute, irreversible public humiliation? What exactly did David say that made Kody demand TLC wipe the footage from existence? To understand the magnitude of this unaired threat, we have to look at what the Sister Wives community is uncovering right now. Reddit threads this week are pointing to a fascinating, hidden detail regarding Kody's business relationship with the network, and it completely exposes why the edit was so undeniably choppy. Some sources suggest that Kody Brown doesn't just act as a cast member. He has historically exerted massive influence over Puddle Monkey Productions, the company behind the show. For years, fans have speculated that Kody holds a contractual veto power that allows him to scrub scenes that make him look irreparably damaging to his brand. Have you ever wondered why certain arguments end abruptly? Or why Kody is allowed to walk away from the cameras without a producer chasing him down? It's because he allegedly controls the narrative. But the internet is undefeated, and the hidden details always leak. Here is a shocking theory that has the fandom buzzing this week. Fans have noticed a distinct pattern in how custody handovers were handled before and after David entered the picture. Before David, Kody allegedly used custody drop-offs as an opportunity to isolate Christine. Sources suggest that without the cameras rolling, Kody would corner Christine in driveways or parking lots, using the handover of Truely to verbally berate Christine, blame her for the family's collapse, and try to guilt-trip her into submission. Can you imagine the anxiety Christine must have felt every time she had to hand her daughter over to a man who treated her with such absolute contempt? How do you co-parent with someone whose sole mission is to break your spirit? When David Woolley found out about these alleged driveway interrogations, the game was over. David wasn't going to let his future wife be emotionally terrorized in a parking lot. According to the leaks, David began accompanying Christine to every single interaction. And this is where the boiling point was finally reached. Fans on Twitter are convinced that the confrontation we saw on screen was just the polite preamble. The real standoff happened when producers tried to film a follow-up discussion, and Kody, feeling bold, allegedly tried to pull rank. Rumors claim Kody tried to invoke his spiritual authority, suggesting that because he was Christine's first sealed husband, David was stepping on sacred territory. Can you even fathom the delusion required to say that to another man? How does a man who abandoned his spiritual covenants claimed spiritual authority? David's reaction wasn't just to defend Christine. It was to completely dismantle Kody's psychological grip on the entire situation. David realized that Kody only understood one language: power. Kody didn't care about emotional appeals. He didn't care about tears. Kody only backed down when he was backed into a corner with overwhelming, undeniable force. We are finally crossing into the ultimate payoff. You've waited patiently, and now it is time to reveal the exact, terrifying ultimatum David Woolley delivered behind closed doors. When you hear the specific words he used, Kody's total retreat from the public eye will suddenly make perfect sense. So, what was the dark, intense threat that TLC allegedly cut to protect Kody Brown's shattered ego? According to the production leaks, after telling Kody to start with your kids on camera, Kody aggressively demanded respect off camera. And that is when David leaned in, dropped the polite television persona, and delivered the final blow. Sources claim David looked Kody dead in the eye and laid down 3 non-negotiable rules. First, David explicitly told Kody that if he ever dismissed Truely's medical needs again, or tried to leave her undersupervised out of sheer negligence, David would personally ensure Kody never had unmonitored access to her again. Second, David addressed the custody drop-offs. He allegedly warned Kody that if he ever tried to corner Christine, raise his voice at her, or verbally abuse her during a handover, David would step in physically. But it was the third threat that completely broke Kody. David allegedly told him, "If you cross this line, I will unleash Utah family lawyers on you so fast your head will spin. We will drag your entire history of medical neglect, emotional abuse, and financial hoarding into a public courtroom, and I will fund the lawsuit myself." David didn't just threaten a fight. He threatened total legal and financial annihilation. He used Kody's deepest fears, public exposure, legal consequences, and financial ruin, and weaponized them. For the first time in his life, Kody was staring at a man he couldn't manipulate, gaslight, or out-yell. Kody was utterly paralyzed. He demanded the footage be cut, he packed his bags, and he retreated back to Robin's mansion, completely defeated. But does a narcissist ever truly surrender? Or do they just wait in the shadows, plotting their revenge through a proxy? What if Kody wasn't the only one furious about David's ultimatum? What if Robin decided to take matters into her own hands to punish Christine for finally breaking free? If you want to know what happened next, that story is already uploaded.